Here's who Americans blame for U.S. failures in Afghanistan. Nearly three-quarters of Americans agree that the United States' involvement in Afghanistan was a failure, according to a new PBS NewsHour/NPR/Marist poll. No matter their politics, generation, gender, race, or income, most agreed it was time to end U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. While a majority disapproved of President Joe Biden's handling of the withdrawal, there were deep divides on how it should have been done. More than a third of Americans, including 54% of Democrats, said the U.S. should have withdrawn all its troops. Another third, including 46% of Republicans, preferred to bring back some U.S. troops, but leave a military presence in the region. Only 1 out of 10 Americans wanted troop levels to stay unchanged. Even fewer, 1 in 20, wanted to send more U.S. troops to the country. Chart by Travis Dobb/PBS NewsHour. The chaotic evacuation of more than 120,000 Americans, U.S. allies, and Afghans from Kabul seems to have cost Biden significant public approval as the nation nears the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Those coordinated acts of terrorism, which killed nearly 3,000 people on U.S. soil that day, drove then-President George W. Bush to initiate a global war on terror, a costly, decades-long effort without a clear end. The war on terror has damaged U.S. credibility with allies and cost trillions of dollars. Yet the U.S. mainland has not suffered another serious international terrorist attack since the war began. We find ourselves with very little to show for our efforts, said William Galston, Senior Fellow of Governance Studies at the Brookings Institution.
Chart by Travis Dobb. PBS NewsHour. With the US gone, Afghans fear the freedoms they gained will be lost. Their country is vastly different today than when the Taliban last held power, said Errol Yabog, a senior fellow who directs the Project on Fragility and Mobility at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. More women and girls are used to having education and careers, and the infant mortality rate has dropped by about 50%. People have had regular access to electricity, the internet and ATMs. Despite the collapse of the U.S.-supported former Afghan government, 29% of Americans say the U.S. has a duty to remain involved with the country. Republicans were close to evenly split over whether to quit the longest war in U.S. history. However, a majority of Americans, 61%, including most Democrats, say Afghanistan should determine its future on its own. Afghans have been left feeling betrayed by the United States and questioning the morals and ethics of their allies, said Shiajan Ahmadzai, who directs the Center for Afghanistan Studies at the University of Nebraska. The U.S. withdrawal was irresponsible, he said, adding that beyond the immediate aftermath, like reports of Taliban reprisals against those who cooperated with Americans, the lives of all 38 million people of Afghanistan are in jeopardy. By leaving, we did not fulfill our promises to ourselves and to the world where we have promoted these rights, Ahmadzai said. August 31, 2021, Washington, D.C., USA. President Biden addresses the nation following the end of the American mission to Afghanistan on August 31, 2021. Mandatory credit, Jessica Koscielniak, USA. TODA. While like Afghans, many Americans also seem to dislike how the U.S. left that nation. Nearly twice as many people disapprove of Biden's handling of the end of the war compared to those who approve. On foreign policy, an area in which he had distinguished himself in Congress and as vice president, 56% of people now disapprove of Biden's performance, a 12-point jump from July. Biden's overall job approval as president declined to his worst standing since he took office nearly 9 months ago, with about half of U.S. adults saying they disapprove of his performance. Chart by Travis Dobb. PBS NewsHour. The Biden administration has been excoriated for not anticipating that the Taliban would seize the country in just 11 days, and for not being better prepared for the mass evacuations that followed. On August 26, the first day this poll was conducted, Americans suffered one of their deadliest days in Afghanistan as an attack on crowds around Kabul's airport killed 13 U.S. service members, along with at least 169 Afghans. But in an August 31 speech from the White House, Biden defended his decision to leave the country how and when it did. The president said he did not want to extend this forever war and pointed to former President Donald Trump's deal with the Taliban to withdraw U.S. troops by May 1. Biden also said he assumed the U.S.-trained Afghan National Security Forces would be a strong adversary in their civil wars with the Taliban. We succeeded in what we set out to do in Afghanistan over a decade ago. Then we stayed for another decade, Biden said. It was time to end this war. 1 out of 5 Americans say Biden is the president most responsible for how the US role unraveled in Afghanistan, with more Republicans than Democrats naming him. More US adults, 36%, pin the blame on Bush, who declared war in 2001. Only 12% of Americans placed the greatest responsibility on the shoulders of Trump, who had orchestrated the US withdrawal when he struck a February 2020 deal with the Taliban. Chart by Vanessa Dennis, PBS NewsHour. It is difficult, and perhaps too soon, to know how ending the war in Afghanistan has diminished Biden's political capital, Galston said, but it's surely not helpful. With key administration goals looming, declines in job approval and public support could undermine Democrats' efforts to push through Biden's domestic policy agenda and erode their power as a whole. When it comes to presidential fallout from an unpopular policy carried out overseas, Americans tend to have a pretty short memory, Galston said. But he cautioned that sometimes ongoing media coverage of unresolved issues, such as daily coverage of the protracted Iranian hostage crisis when President Jimmy Carter was in office, could be drummed into people's consciousness as a continuing problem, not a problem from the past. Refugees disembark from a US Air Force aircraft after an evacuation flight from Kabul at the Rota Naval Base in Rota, southern Spain, on August 31, 2021. Spain has agreed to host up to 4,000 Afghans who will be airlifted by the United States to air bases in Rota and More and de la Frontera in southern Spain. About 3/4 of Americans say the US should allow Afghan refugees to enter the country to escape the current situation. That includes most Democrats and independents, with Republicans divided on the question.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.